I've heard you speak, I think, oh, welcome, John, twice now. And I swear every time I learn something different. I think we had you join for the intern learning development this past summer with Anna Sophia leading that. So thank you for joining us again. I'll give a quick kind of overview of Embark and kind of why this group of people is all here. But then I'd love for you to just kind of get started, introduce yourself. And I think that last time, once we had your career overview, go for like 35 minutes because it was so fascinating, but a consolidated version of that. So Embark is a program for APMMs that is meant to foster some mentorship, specifically with level 5 to 7 folks within devices and services that sit outside of their reporting line. And this is really meant to be somebody that can say, hey, I don't sit in your org, but here's how I can help you kind of problem solve in some context that might be helpful. We found that mentorship within teams is obviously very important, but that layer removed and the layer above really helps to kind of create more structure and perspective building, which is really important. So I think the majority of the folks on this call are APMMs. Actually, I think everybody but Julie and I, but this process is really meant to just foster that community. And then Julie actually helped me start this program with Xanthi as our executive sponsor. It's something that her and I are very passionate about, wanted to bring to this group. But I will pass over to you to do an intro and a career overview. We'll get into more questions kind of afterwards.
Oh, fun. Well, hi, everyone. It's nice to meet you or meet you again. Thank you for having me here today. And I hope this can be really interactive and engaging. I saw you guys had put together some questions, but feel free to ask questions and add anything you'd like to the chat so we can have a conversation as though we were really in a room together and not just virtually over a computer. My name is Tara Sharp, and I've been at Google a little more than 2 years. I'm the director of marketing for Google Fi, G1, Google One, G1, and I oversee all cross subscriptions marketing. So all the subscriptions businesses at Google, that includes the two that I just mentioned, as well as Stadia, as well as YouTube TV, YouTube Premium, and so on and so forth. So we actually have a lot of subscriptions businesses. And I'm not involved in those businesses on a day-to-day basis, but we put together a lot of our overarching initiatives, make sure that we're all coordinated and aligned. And we've got some really great work that we're trying to do in the future that we're really excited about, some really thoughtful strategic work. Since each of those businesses was established in a little vacuum, they do everything completely on their own. And so we're trying to help everybody, play nicely together. And it's actually been really fun and really rewarding. I have a very unconventional background by Google standards. I was actually in the wine industry for 20 years. I became a master sommelier somewhere along the line. I'm a level 2 certified master sommelier. So if anybody has seen the movie Somm, raise your hand if you've seen the movie Somm. Okay, check it out on Netflix. It's really fun. They were studying for level 4. I did not do level 4. That is like a whole another level. I mean, it really is another level, but those guys are very, very, very sophisticated and focused. But I had a lot of fun with it, and I really just did it for fun, and it was a great education. Worked in the wine industry for 20 years. I grew up sort of all over the world, but mostly in Sonoma County. And my first job when I was 16 was at a little winery near our family home. And I was employee number 44 at this tiny little winery called Kendall Jackson. And today, Kendall Jackson's one of the largest privately owned wine companies in the world. It's actually the second largest privately owned wine company in the world. So I was in the right place at the right time with a good attitude. I wanted to learn. I wanted to contribute. And luckily for me, the founder and CEO of the company saw in me somebody who was young and ambitious and wanted to work hard. And I got a lot of opportunities just for those reasons, right place, right time with a good attitude. That was really what it was. So there were some days when I came into work and I would polish 200 wine glasses. And there were other days when I came into work and they said, put together, a plan to export wine to Australia and New Zealand. So it was just like a mind-boggling experience as a young person. And definitely, all through college, I interned there and really learned a lot. So wine industry for 20 years. And then I had a huge career change when my youngest daughter was an infant. I had one of those life experiences that just changed everything for me in the blink of an eye. And I realized that I had other passions and other work to do in this one life that I have to live. And so I abruptly quit working in the wine industry, and I was really at the top of my game. I was actually interviewing for the CMO, Chief Marketing Officer role at a publicly traded wine company. So one of the, top 4 wine companies in the world. And I said, you know what, this is not my calling. This is not my path. There's something else out there for me. And so I shifted my career after that. And I spent 5 years as the CMO of a tech startup called Sonic, and took a year off to take care of my kids. My daughter was going through some surgeries. And then I joined Google about 2.5 years ago in the role of director of marketing for Google Fi. And my scope has increased since then. There's a good overview. What do you think, Lily?
I'm remembering when you did it in July and thinking like, there's a few things that she's not touching on, but that would take so long, because truly, like, I've never met somebody that has bounced between industries and in incredible roles and incredibly entrepreneurial in my life. So I like hope that people continue to get more tastes of it, but your career story really is fascinating. Can you speak a little bit to those moments of change in the different industries that you were in? I think like a lot of the folks on this call, Google's their first job, and
Yes.
it's their first job out of college, which I think we start to think that tech culture is like the norm. So I'd love to hear about your experiences kind of between these different cultures and what's resonated with you.
Yeah, gosh, that's a great question, Lily. And tech culture is definitely not the norm. But on the other hand, I look at all of you and I think how extraordinary it is for you all to have worked so hard to get to this place in your life. And this experience of this being your first job out of college and learning everything that you'll learn at Google will set you up for just a very interesting life. So I'm not sure where this happened, but somewhere along the line in my childhood, I realized that leading an interesting life was something that was really important to me. I think it's probably by way of background, my mom is from Australia. My dad was from Southern California. My parents met in a train station in India. And then they went their own separate ways. And months later, they met again in another train station, or not in a train station, but in another city in India. They fell in love. They ended up, my dad, like classic American, was in India for 3 weeks to seek enlightenment, right? During his 3-week vacation. And my mom, classic Australian, was traveling around the world for years with like not a lot of money, but a backpack on her back. So they totally fit those like stereotypes for those cultures. And my dad was just so enamored with my mom that he actually ended up staying with my mom and traveling around the world with her for 2 more years. They bought a VW bus and lived in the bus and traveled the world and explored cultures. So I share that with you because that story actually really helps set the image for you all on the sort of childhood that I had. Just because they ended up selling the VW bus and coming to America, and I was born in the States. I have 2 younger brothers. We were all 3 born in the United States, but we all spent a lot of time moving, like in Australia. We went to school. We all went to school in Australia. We all lived in Mexico together. One of my brothers and I went to school in Mexico. We were blonde-headed, blue-eyed, fair-skinned kids thrown into a school in Mexico. It was awesome, like in a little fishing village. Nobody spoke English. It was, and we lived in Indonesia for a while. I made friends with, lots of little girls who were, Muslim Indonesian girls, and their mothers wore burqas. And one of the many things that came out of this sort of like extraordinary childhood and this access to all these different cultures and peoples is that it became very important to me to live an interesting life. And an interesting life can be defined in many, many ways. But one of the things that I found, travel and experiencing, not just learning about, but like actually being engaged in different cultures means a lot to me. Sia knows I love an immigration story, like hot damn. I should someday write a book about, or like do a podcast on immigrant stories. Like I just love immigrant stories. In large part because of my mom, kind of my mom's immigration story and whatnot. But what happened to me is that I ended up working in the wine industry because I had all this incredible access to a very interesting life. Like I would say for the first kind of like 12 years or so that I was in the wine industry, it was unbelievably interesting. I was learning about business. I was learning about making wine. I was learning about how to market. I was learning about how internal politics worked. I learned how a fax machine worked. I learned how to send an email. I learned how to build websites. I learned, it was endlessly fascinating to me. And then the people around the wine industry, not just the people who are working in the wine industry, but the people who are attracted to the wine industry also tend to be pretty interesting. So I met some pretty extraordinary people from all over the world who were either, big customers or somehow engaged in the wine industry and whatnot. And that was extremely fulfilling to me for a very long time. And I've had all these really unbelievable experiences. If I told you, you'd be like, you're gotta be kidding me. But just meeting, Olympic athletes and astronauts, and Itzhak Perlman did a private concert for 6 of us or something at a winery one day. Just all these things that I think are hard for anybody to believe. So that kept me very engaged for a very long time. And then our second daughter was born, and she was born, she has a congenital heart disease. And when I was 6 months pregnant with her, we found out that she had this congenital heart disease, and we were told that she would not survive. And I was absolutely terrified and devastated. Luckily, we live near Stanford Children's Hospital, and we got a referral to Stanford Children's Hospital and spent a lot of time meeting with doctors there, trying to develop a plan for how to help support our daughter and hopefully keep her alive. It included keeping her alive, included, a middle of the night helicopter flight for me. I was in labor and had to be airlifted from Santa Rosa to Stanford Children's Hospital, where she was born. She had her first heart surgery when she was a few hours old, second when she was 5 days old. The team at Stanford Children's Hospital was the only team in the world at that point that knew how to repair her particular heart condition. She has a heart disease called tetralogy of Fallot, and she also had pulmonary atresia and something called MAPGAs. And what it meant was that it was horrendous. And it was if she had been born 10 years earlier, there would have been no chance for her to survive. And the first several doctors I spoke to said she had no chance of survival. And it was only once we found Dr. Hanley at Stanford Children's Hospital that he said that he could do the surgery and there was about a 30% chance that she would survive. So I know it's heavy for me to share that with you, but through that life experience, there were a lot of tears. There was just, I mean, it just completely took over most of my waking hour thoughts and my dreaming thoughts too, right? This is, you know, my baby, who was perfectly happy in my stomach, could survive, love, like it was growing and thriving in my tummy, would not be able to breathe once she was born. And luckily, Stanford Children's Hospital saved her life. They actually did a documentary on her because it was such a groundbreaking case. And she's the first person in our family of about 50 family members who've had this disease who survived.
What's the name of the of the documentary? I'd love to put it in the recap.
I'll send it out to you. It's just like a little short 7-minute documentary that they did.
Yeah.
And they, I'll be glad to send it to you and share it with everyone. Yeah. It's on YouTube. So after that experience, I was still in the hospital. She was still in the hospital. We were in the hospital. And I was looking at the nurses who came in all day, every day, and were saving children's lives. Like literally, their careers were dedicated to saving children's lives. And I realized that I didn't want to be in the wine industry at all anymore. And overnight, it didn't matter to me at all. Luckily, I was in a position where I could, financially, I was in a position where I could pause. I needed to work again because open heart surgeries are really expensive. But I knew I needed to work again. And also I really enjoy working. My career means a lot to me. It's very fulfilling to me. And even if I didn't financially need to work, which is not the case, but I would imagine I would still be working because I enjoy working very much. But my career just changed. My career motivations just changed completely. I hope none of you ever have an experience like I did, which is so heartbreaking and forces you to really reconsider what it is that you're doing with your life. But even smaller things, I know COVID forced a lot of my friends to reconsider what they are doing. And I hope that, and not to say that COVID's a smaller thing, I'm sorry, that's a terrible term. So even other things such as COVID or, just seeing your friends make career changes or travel, or it could be many, many, many different things. They inspire you to critically consider your career. And in my case, I knew I really was still having fun in the wine industry, but I knew that I wasn't making as big of an impact on the world as I was called to do. I knew I had a greater calling, a bigger calling. I saw these nurses who were dedicating their lives to saving the lives of children. And I was like, what the fuck am I doing with my life? This is my one precious life. Is this what I'm doing? I'm making fancy wine for rich people? Like record scratch, like it was just such a wake-up call. It was crystal clear to me in that moment that everything needed to change. And
how did you figure out where to jump? Because I think that's a really interesting pivot too, because APMMs at about the 1 to 1.5 year mark have to make a really important career decision. Do I stay in my role? Do I go to a different one? And Google, as you know, is this endless pit of opportunity. So how did you decide where to jump to next?
I didn't know. So it was very scary. This was I jumped off on an airplane with no parachute. And honestly, it was among the scariest things that I've done in my life. That said, I had just birthed a child who was unable to breathe, got her through multiple open heart and lung surgeries. And so I figured nothing was scarier than that. So I'm strong, I can do this thing. And I also knew I had a backup plan. In worst case scenario, I could go back to the wine industry. And that was a really healthy trick for me. I knew it was a total mind game, but that's a good trick. And that's something you should file away for later in life is that it's great to take risks. It's great to try new things, but if you're too scared, like kind of psych yourself out and be like, oh, I've got this backup plan, you know? And that has helped me many times have the courage to do something that I might not have done otherwise. So what I did is I spent a bunch of time talking to people. And I looked around and I asked for coffee chats with people who I thought were interesting. It comes back to that same thing, like people who are living interesting lives. And they tended not to be somebody who like got their PhD in, bioengineering and became a bioengineer and were working at the same company for the rest of their lives. Like that tended not to be something that I was particularly attracted to. I was attracted to people who led what I thought were very full, rich lives and who did some things over here and did some things over here and kind of what we would maybe think of as a Renaissance person, interested in lots of different things. And that was a good fit for me. The shoe dropped for me, the penny dropped for me when I attended an event in San Francisco. A dear friend of mine was at the time working for the United Nations. And I admired the hell out of her and her career. And I had coffee with her and told her about my career path and my personal journey. And really, it was a personal journey. My life, it was my, many of you might have heard this in my league talk, but I think that you should create your life plans and your career should support your life plans and not the other way around. So my friend Elizabeth was the entrepreneur in residence at the United Nations. And luckily she invited me to a United Nations discussion in San Francisco. I will never forget it. I was her +1. I shouldn't have been there. I was just her date to this thing. And their chief marketing officer got up and spoke about the United Nations top 11 priorities for the world. And he talked about, education. He talked about clean drinking water. He talked about environmental impact. He had 11 initiatives. And one that kept coming up for me over and over and over was, the importance of educating women and girls. And there were threads of that. That was one of the 11, but it was threaded into lots of the others. And one of the initiatives was really good internet access around the globe. And one of the benefits of really good internet access around the globe was to help educate women and girls, right? And what that would do for global poverty levels and for food and like the trickle down effects of that were mind blowing. And actually, as I tell you this story right now, all these years later, I'm getting goosebumps because I'm remembering being in that room, and I'm not gonna lie, like I got choked up. I kind of broke down into tears. And I knew, just as I had known 6 months before when I was in the hospital with my daughter, that I could no longer be in the wine industry. I knew in that moment what I wanted to do next. And I knew that I wanted to help educate women and girls around the world. And then I had to figure out, how could I do that with the skills that I already had? And because we live in the Bay Area, a great way for me to do that was to help support really strong global internet access technology and to do things like be an outstanding advocate for net neutrality and practices like that. So that is where my career has evolved to. And I was the CMO of Sonic, which is an incredible, it was a startup. When I started, it was a startup. When I left, it was no longer a startup. It was a very big company. And they built, they built the initial Google Fiber projects. So they built all of the first fiber cities and all those sorts of things. So we were really focused on developing and then establishing the first gigabit fiber internet in the United States and then beyond. So it was awesome. So that was the pivot. That was my career pivot. It was a big
Yeah.
one. Very scary,
That makes
but
it. I know that a lot of your jumps, they sound so terrifying, but I think that idea of having like a backup plan, even if it's just a mental trick, is not just something for like career, but also in big life decisions. I think that's something to think about too. I'd love for
yeah.
you to talk a little bit about how you've built so much resilience. I mean, hearing your story, you like personally and career wise have just experienced a lot. And I would love to hear about like what tools you use or ideas, things that you like to use or think about when trying to build some amount of resiliency. I think in the past year and a half, we've all kind of had to learn this with COVID and experiencing a very ambiguous and unsure world. So I'd love to hear about kind of what your tools and your thoughts on that.
Yeah, wow, that's a great question, Lily. I actually get asked about resilience quite a lot. It's an interesting topic, and I think it's become much more interesting to people in the last year and a half. I kind of went into the pandemic feeling like I had superpowers in some ways because I'd already built some methodologies in supporting myself in a way that helped me be more resilient. There's no one like silver bullet or magic bullet. I always get that thing mixed up. I think isn't a silver bullet, isn't that the Coors ad or something?
I think it is. Isn't it also to do with like werewolves or something?
Oh, I don't
Like the
know.
silver bullet's like the thing that's gonna get it. I think that they're the same,
Oh,
maybe.
maybe it's the
Julie can
same.
probably
Okay,
keep
I
us
don't
more
know.
honest.
There's no one thing you can do to help build your resiliency, but I have found that resiliency, curiosity, and a good attitude are like the three magical things. If you're taking notes right now, write that down. Resiliency, curiosity, and a good attitude, leading with kindness, assuming that everybody's being honest and telling the truth and wants to be a partner with you. And then if they prove you otherwise, they prove you otherwise. But, and then you move on. But those three things have been incredible markers for my life. And I would love for all of you to walk away from this conversation feeling like those can be cornerstones for you, and feel free to add to them or make them your own. But those have been really impactful for me. And resiliency is something that you don't build overnight. It's a combination of things. For me, what I have found is that I've had a number of really hard things happen in my life, and you all have as well. And maybe the things that I've had happen in my life sound scary to you, but I guarantee you that the things that you've had happen in your life sound scary to me, because I haven't been in your shoes. I haven't been in your journey. And so I encourage you to think about that, reflect on that, and not discount your own journey just because maybe it doesn't sound as scary as having a newborn baby in a hospital having open heart surgeries. But, the journey that you went through, maybe losing a pet, maybe losing a loved one, even, a grandparent dying who was very close to you, that you were very emotionally close to. All of those things are painful, and many, many other things. And certainly during COVID, we've all had to build our resiliency, and we've had down times and up times. And this is you have to think of resiliency as a muscle. So start to think about how you build a muscle around this. The first thing I would do is when you're in difficult circumstances, and I know during COVID, you've all experienced this, is that you're not upbeat and happy every day. Like, being resilient doesn't mean you're like, oh, yay, I'm Pollyanna. Like, everything's going to be fantastic every day. That's not what it is at all. I have found through a lot of hard work that resiliency for me, a cornerstone of resiliency, is to be loving and kind to myself, even during the hard times. And my mom did this with me all the time when I was young. And I was always like, oh, Mom, this sucks. I can't believe you're saying it. But I'm going to share it with you now because she was right. It totally works. Is like, in your mind, you're beating yourself up because you did something wrong. you think you did something wrong. But if your best friend were sitting next to you, or your sister, your loved one was sitting next to you and telling you that they did the same exact thing, what would you say to them? Would you say, oh, that really sucks. I'm so sorry. I'm going to sit here with you and listen to you, and then let's go get some ice cream together because I still love you despite the mistake you made? No, probably something like that, right? And so it took me a long, long time to learn how to do that with myself, especially after hardship had happened in my life. The first major hardship that happened in my life was my dad died when I was 18. My dad died when I was a teenager, and I loved him very, very much. We were extremely close, and he committed suicide the summer, right as I was starting my freshman year of college. And I was, not only did my dad die, but there was additional complexity because it was a suicide. And this had been such a happy, upbeat person in like 98% of my life. And I didn't know that he was struggling with PTSD after having been in Vietnam. That was something my parents kept to themselves. But I did know as a kid. I knew that, 95% of the time he hopped out of bed in the morning, was helping get us ready for school. He was volunteering at school. He was little league coach and whatnot. And then, occasionally he would be in bed for prolonged periods of time with the blinds shut. And after my dad died, I went into my own, sort of mild depression. As I look back on it, what that was a mild depression. And I spent the bulk of that time beating myself up, saying, why didn't I see the signs? Why couldn't I have helped him? And so on and so forth. And it took me a long time and a lot of therapy to get to a point where I realized I just love my dad now. I love him. I honor the journey that he was on. I'm grateful for everything that he contributed to me, my life, my brothers, my mom, our community. And, I forgive him and I forgive myself. And so I think in order to be resilient, that's like the foundation. That is the core foundation piece, is you have to do that work to love and accept yourself, forgive yourself, and be kind to yourself. And it might be as, like you might have screwed up on a test. I know many of you are recent college graduates. Maybe you went to a test and you totally like flubbed it. Maybe you went into a job interview and you flubbed it, right? If you can be kind to yourself, if you can pause and just reflect on how would you treat your friend, how would you treat the loved one next to you, and then treat yourself that way, that will be your cornerstone of resiliency. Now, beyond that, find a damn good therapist. Surround yourself with some wonderful friends who love you. Like, I've got friends who are just so wonderful. Yes, Lyra Health. Thank you, Lily. Big shout out to Lyra Health. I use Lyra Health. Use Lyra Health. It's free for Googlers. Yay. Woo-hoo. I've got some amazing, amazing friends who make my life so rich and meaningful. Surround yourself with people who inspire you and who love you regardless of how you show up. I mean, I look pretty good today, right? But there are days when I do not look good. There are days when I am freaked out about little things. And my friends are the ones who pick up the phone no matter what. They come and they meet me and they stand beside me as I go through my suffering. And I do the same for them. So be a good friend and surround yourself with really great friends. There's other things from there, but if you do that, if you learn how to take good care of yourself, to love yourself, if you have a great therapist and great friends, you will. That is the recipe for being resilient.
I love that. I love the emphasis on friends and like community building. I think that's something that's so important, especially as a lot of this group has just moved to a new location, potentially for their job. And understand that building that community does take time, but it can be so enriching. It's really important.
Totally. I have felt more community here since I've joined Google than I have felt at any other place in my life, any other one source in my life. And I have made some friends in the last couple of years here at Google who blow me away. Like Like Maya Schaefer is just an example. Y'all should look up Maya Schaefer after this. She worked in the Obama White House. She established the cognitive behavioral group in the Obama White House. She runs the cognitive behavior group for Google marketing. She is my friend. I talk to her all the time. We text each other all the time. We're like friends. We tell each other that we love one another. And every once in a while, I'm like, I love Maya. I do. She is a friend. And then every once in a while I pause and I'm like, oh my God, she's such a badass. Like, I am so honored to even know her. And I know you guys will all have those same moments, those same experiences here at Google. Another one, I'm going to just drop some more awesome names for you guys. Another one is Ivy Ross. So
Obsessed.
Ivy, yeah.
Absolutely obsessed with her. I'm going to her house in 2 weeks and I'm like about to cry.
Oh my God, Ivy. I revered Ivy before I started at Google. And I was like, oh my God, maybe someday when I work at Google, like when I was applying for the job and I was interviewing, I was like, oh my gosh, I wonder if I'll ever get to meet Ivy Ross. Not only did I meet her, not only have I like engaged with her on a whole bunch of different topics, she lives in my neighborhood. And my husband and I went over to dinner at Ivy's house last week with her and her husband. I know, see the jaw drop? Like I just threw out some, like Ivy Ross is my friend. Yeah. She is
That's so cool.
Like mind blowing. I know, totally. I mean, I'm jealous of myself. It's mind blowing. but fundamentally, Ivy Ross is an incredible human being and a wonderful person and a good, just like I feel so I appreciate her as a professional, but I value her even more as a colleague and as a friend. So for those of you who are just getting started here, you are going to make some friends. Like, I mean, I should probably just put together like a brag book for my family and be like, look at my friends, aren't they awesome? And I actually think that's part of like a really great friendship is when you have that level of respect and appreciation for one another that you kind of geek out. Yes, that's correct. Sia, Maya Shaker. Yeah. Also, plug for Maya. She's got my favorite podcast. It's called A Slight Change in Plans. Check it out.
I'm writing all this down to make sure it goes in the recap notes. Don't we worry.
Yeah.
This is incredible. And I think I love the idea of being like proud and almost bragging about, well, not almost, definitely bragging about your friends. I feel like that's something that, like when we talk about people that we love, that's such a wonderful testament to how much we care about them, is just to be able to be like, no, this person's freaking cool. Like, yeah. I wish that you could know them as well as I do. Is really beautiful.
And we call each other when we're stressed and crying and freaked out, like, you know, so like having that tribe around you is, for me anyway, I physically cannot express how important that is to me.
Yeah, and that's a really important point. I think, Sia, I wanted to see if you wanted to ask your Dory question live around letting go of perfectionism. I think it kind of tees off of resilience, but I'd love for you to ask your question live.
Yeah, so as Tara has known, she started a whole conversation series called A League of Their Own, similar to that's the baseball movie, right? I think I watched it when I was a kid.
There's no crying in baseball.
Yeah,
that's right. Tom Hanks, there's no crying in baseball. It is. And the concept is like, they did something that nobody thought could be done. And a bunch of unlikely cast of characters got together. They made it happen.
And let
that be a motivation for all of us.
So you had your first talk last week or the week before. I've been watching the recording. It's on YouTube. I can drop the link now. In that talk, you share that you realize as a perfectionist that I would say you're a rehabilitated perfectionist. You decided to let go because you realize your fear of things not being perfect got in the way of risk, working out, and greater reward. So I wanted to know what part of your career, I think it might be at Sonic or maybe here at Google, but before I started, made you realize that I can't do this anymore and I want to have a culture of leaning into failure to learn from that and do better?
Ooh, Sia, bringing it in with not only a beautiful recap, but a great question. Props. I like it. So actually, my answer is a little bit different than I think you anticipated. I broke the perfection thing when I was in the wine industry. So many of you might experience this. Googlers tend to have this as a trait. We tend to be, kind of like the students that work really hard in high school, the students that work really hard in college, and in order to, do well in high school and college, you have to get an A on an exam, and that means you're striving towards perfection all the time, right? And it was, my first several years of work, I worked really hard to be perfect, but I never took any risks because I was always afraid I was going to get fired, which in retrospect, I'm like, oh my God, they were never going to fire me. I was like working my butt off and doing really good work. They were never going to fire me, but I had this maybe imposter syndrome, I think. I was definitely always the only woman in the room and whatnot. And I think I had a lot of imposter syndrome. And so somewhere in my early 30s, I was like, fuck that. That is why did I allowed myself to fall into this American, but truly global, standardization of striving for perfection. And that doesn't exist. Perfectionism, perfect doesn't freaking exist. If it's your teacher's idea of perfect, well, that's bullshit. That's because guess what? Your teacher might think that, but go ask another teacher and they're going to have a different idea of what perfect is. So you're always striving to be perfect for something, and it is exhausting. I exhausted myself trying to be perfect. And it was probably when, I was in the wine industry. I recognized this about myself. I recognized this was something I wanted to change for myself. And I actually left and I started I've been very entrepreneurial. I've started several businesses. And one of them was a granola bar company, organic granola bar company. And it was in that process. And because we were working with organic products and whatnot, it actually really forced me it really tested me and forced me to step away from perfect. And as I stepped away from it, I had much more space to take risks. And ultimately, I think I did significantly better work, far more interesting work, because I stopped coloring within the lines. And I started painting what I saw. I started painting what I felt.
That's incredible. I feel like we all. Oh, go ahead, Sia.
Sorry, that's such a great quote. I've stopped coloring inside the lines and painting what I saw. That's really great. Thanks for answering my question.
Well, thank you for calling that out. I just said it and I didn't realize that is a good quote. Now that you said it back, I like that. Thank you, Sia. Maybe that should be the tagline for A League of Their Own. One of the other things I want to give credit to my boss at Sonic, the CEO of Sonic, Dane Jasper. I was wanting to kind of experiment some more with my leadership style. I had this voice, I had this leadership style that I really wanted to try. And Dane gave me a very safe platform to do it. He really liked what I was doing. A lot of the things that I was doing, he was doing as well. So we were doing them either side by side or learning from one another. We had a lot of great conversations. I tried this with my team and it worked really well. Then I'd be like, okay, I'll go try that with my team. And oh, it didn't work well. What? What do we do next? It's been extraordinarily powerful. And, one of the really cool things I've observed is that since I established this mindset and this became one of the principles for my leadership philosophies, I've had almost nobody leave my teams. My PMR scores, so that's my, management scores, are always very, very high. I have one open position right now. We had 45 internal applicants for this one open position. And it's because people are drawn to this kind of open mindset and yes, FIA is amazing, yay. And this space where people feel safe to make mistakes. One of the things that I used to do before COVID is once a month or so, I would get champagne and sparkling cider, and we'd have a little celebration for the people who, no, not the people who had the greatest successes that month. No, the people who fucked up the worst that month. And I did that because I wanted to reinforce that it is safe to make mistakes. Yeah. It is safe to make mistakes. Not everybody's manager is as aggressive as I am on this stuff, but I hope that me sharing this for you helps you embody. I hope you can embody it, and I hope it's something you can teach people around you and maybe even influence up. And if they're not comfortable with it, have them meet with me.
Send them this recording.
Yes, totally.
I wanted to open up to see if anyone has any questions that they want to share live. If not, I have a plethora of more I can go through, but I wanted to make sure everyone had an opportunity to ask the question. No one's hitting the unmute button. All right, forever hold your peace.
It's scary to hit unmute sometimes. That's okay. You guys can ping me or email me too, or ask Sia for the league information and join league.
Yeah, I'll make sure to send the information in. Again, I know we had shared it previously, but for folks that are now feeling fully inspired, I'd love to hear, I'm trying to skip ahead, maybe switch a topic, to hear about what skills you're working on right now. I think we hear a lot in the APMM world about building your marketing skills early, but also, at least I personally am a huge believer in you never stop growing, you never stop learning new things. And so I'd love to hear maybe early on a skill that you learned that you've carried into your everyday and what you're learning right now.
Yeah, I've already shared a bunch of skills that I learned, and isn't it interesting? They're soft skills. So I learned a lot of hard skills too, but it's those soft skills that have carried me through. And I'm going to say, when I hire people, Sia knows this, when I hire people, I'm looking for those soft skills because it's really hard to teach people the soft skills. It is really easy to teach people how to, it's not really easy to teach them how to design a website, but you get what I mean. That is a trainable thing. Whereas to teach people, somebody to be kind or open-minded or curious, I'm not going to be able to do that. So that's work that you all, everybody has to do for themselves. So I am always learning. The moment I stopped learning, I would be very bored. I'd be very sad, very bored. So I'm always learning new things. And, I don't know what the philosophy is for the APMM community right now. I think it's great that you guys go through rotations. I think it's so powerful. And I would encourage you all to experience as much as you can right now so that you can figure out what you really enjoy and also what you don't enjoy. I did these internships at Kendall Jackson, and I thought I wanted to go into public relations for some reason. I actually didn't know what public relations even was, but it sounded nice. And so I did an internship in public relations at Kendall Jackson, and I hated it. I fundamentally hated it. And I was like, okay, I'm going to change my major. I'm not going to be a public relations major. And that's great. That's okay. That was so valuable to me. And I want to encourage you all to have those experiences right now during your rotations. Just try different things, figure out what feels really good to you, what really inspires you. And then the other thing is that the people around you really, really matter. So if you're going into work every day with a bunch of people who don't inspire you, who are doing really good work, but don't inspire you, that's not the right group for you to be in either. And you'll find your people. There's all different personalities and backgrounds and whatnot. And you'll find the right space for you. So just experiment a lot, try a lot. I actually think that's really good advice to carry on throughout your career. So you'll dive into one area and you'll get really good at one area. But something that I found at Google is that we we tend to pigeonhole people. We're like, oh, you are a great brand marketer. Ooh, you are a great growth marketer. Like, you are an expert at SEO. Like, that is so great. And actually, I'm looking for people who are more generalists, want to get to a more senior role. So it gets tricky because, like, at this stage, you're supposed to be kind of generalist, and then you kind of get into this point where you're like supposed to really narrow in on one area. I would say try to resist narrowing in on one area. Or if you become an expert in SEO, then hop over and go become an expert in design. You can do that at Google, and not even necessarily within marketing. Like, you're in marketing right now, fantastic. Maybe you want to switch over to product. Maybe you're really interested in finance. Maybe you're interested in something totally different businesses, different whatevers. You are at one of the only companies in the world where you can switch around, try a whole bunch of different things, and still stay employed and like keep your health benefits exactly as they were. So booyakasha, go for it. Like, enjoy that, take advantage of that, and have fun with it.
I think that's within my PMM time, I stayed within devices and services, but went from product or partner marketing to creative strategy. And while I think the jump to like an entirely different business would have been fascinating, and definitely encourage people to consider rotating outside of DSM, although I will always want you to stay. I understand, go grow. But I think that functional change is really important, because you're introduced to an entirely different group of people, entirely different skill sets, and it's incredible. It's a really cool growth moment. We have truly only 1 minute left, and I know that everyone probably has another 17 meetings to jump through. So I just want to say thank you, Tara, for coming, for joining us, for speaking to us, and sharing so much wisdom and kindness and warmth. I think it's really palpable even over GDC, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Lily. Thank you, everyone. I'm so proud of you all. So proud of you all. Just keep your heads up, be proud of yourself. And if you ever need a pep talk, let me know.
Perfect. Have a good one. Thank you, guys.
Take care. Bye, guys.